Welcome to the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology Podcast. Thomas Miller along with Robert Glasscock. And Robert, we've got a question right up my alley this time.
Hi, Thomas. Hope you're well. I had a question regarding the New York Stock Exchange and how the New York Stock Exchange birth chart has any correlation with the current transits that are underway, specifically with the Uranus transit. If you can shed some light on this, it'd be great. I'm kind of curious how this would actually translate into what's happening now with all the ups and downs in the market. Thank you.
Well, I'll tell you what, this is a great question. You want me to take a little bit of this here at the beginning?
Please, you're the expert.
Well, I'll tell you, the only thing that I would say here is that I've been working with Ray Merriman on the Fun Astrology podcast since 3 years, I guess, that I've been doing these annual forecast books. This next year, when he writes the one for 2026, it will be the 50th year anniversary of the forecast book. It's an almanac, and he looks at all the areas of the economy, all the various markets, and puts it all together under the representation of astrology, pointing us to or showing us the signs or the cycles that the stock market moves through on a very predictable basis. How the market moves is basically reflected in the sky. And as Ray pointed out in last year's forecast book for 2025, that we were completing a particular cycle that should lead to a crest in the markets this year. He predicted possibly 2 crests. And what have we already had? A 20% drop. So you just can't mess with this stuff. It's like it is incredibly accurate. But before we go to the New York Stock Exchange, let's just look structurally at a couple of things. Look, we've had since 2018, Uranus has been in Taurus. It's getting ready this summer to move into Gemini. During this transit of the past 7 years that Uranus has been in Taurus, what have we seen come into the picture? Digital currency shakeups, even this latest thing that happened with the tariff announcement. People don't realize it, but we were just days away from a real challenge in the markets. And a lot of things happened under the scenes that if you haven't read those things of what took place, you know that we were careening to a catastrophe. They reverted it. Thank God. But you also have all of these outer planets changing signs. We've talked about this a lot. Neptune is now in Aries. Saturn's getting ready to move in there. Pluto has already moved into Aquarius, and then Jupiter will be moving into Cancer. We have not seen that amount of planetary change, major sign changes from the outer planets. Ray said his database goes back like, I don't know, 6,000 years, and they can't find that much change in this compressed of a time. So right there with Uranus and Taurus at the later degrees getting ready to move into the divided sign of Gemini, you would expect that we would have shakeups and breakups and changes and surprises. I like the way that Noel Teal described Uranus. You remember what his description was for it, Robert?
I don't.
Bzzzt. It was bzzzt. Well, yeah, we've had bzzzt, and we're getting ready to have more bzzzt as all of this continues to change. So that's my initial take on just the overall structure of her question. Now, I have the New York Stock Exchange chart we can put up in a second, but what are some of your thoughts here?
They're not my thoughts, although I was just reading this past week what Warren Buffett had to say. One of the things, too, this is a guy named Robert Hayworth, who is a senior investment strategist at the U.S. Bank. And here's his quote. This is a market, just what you're saying, Tom. This is a market trying to get clarity on direction and not getting a lot of conclusions. So then you talk to Warren Buffett of Berkshire Hathaway, and he says, quote, a simple rule dictates my buying. Be fearful when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are fearful. So he's talking about over the short term, these concerns about tariff policies, disrupting supply chains, and reigniting inflation, all of that, they're very valid if you're in a situation where you need to live on income from your investments. Say if you've just retired, for example. But for Warren Buffett, he says investing is a long game played over the course of decades. And here's what he says. Um, Fears regarding the long term prosperity of the nation's many sound companies make no sense. These businesses will indeed suffer earnings hiccups, as they always have, but most major companies will be setting new profit records 5, 10, and 20 years from now. You would be, even if investors panic, Warren Buffett still says he would continue to steadily buy U.S. stocks, even if the headlines get very dire, because investors have been here before and they're going to eventually prosper again. Over the long term, the stock market news will be good. In the 20th century, the United States endured 2 world wars and other traumatic and expensive military conflicts, the Great Depression, a, a dozen or so recessions and financial panics, oil shocks, a flu epidemic, and the resignation of a disgraced president. Yet the Dow rose from 66 to 11,497. So I just wanted to throw that in, that it's very easy to get panicked and take things to extremes. But here's Warren Buffett, and we all wish we had Warren Buffett for our daddy.
Oh, I know. I know. He's talk about another goat. That's another goat. We got
True.
one goat right here. We got another goat that you're just talking about. And I forget the exact number, but it was a huge amount of cash that he raised. So he lightened his portfolio up a lot last fall because he could see these same cycles that Ray Merriman has been talking about. And if you're interested in that, we read Ray's weekly newsletter on the Fun Astrology podcast every Saturday. He writes a free weekly newsletter that comes out on his website, but we read it on the Fun Astrology podcast. So if you're interested in his ongoing thoughts, you can catch them there. She mentioned the New York Stock Exchange chart, and let's just take a look at that real quick because it depicts the same thing. Now, the New York Stock Exchange was attributed to being formed by the Buttonwood Agreement, which was there still is a Buttonwood tree right out in front of the New York Stock Exchange. Not the one that was from 1792, but there's a replacement there. This is May 17th, and we've set the chart, as we always do when we don't know a birth time, to 12 p.m., and then we've put the sun on the ascendant point. So you can see that's how this chart is set up. And with that, we have a Taurus ascendant, but look at what's there from a transiting perspective. Good old Uranus. So even if we looked at this right there, you could just stop and say, oh, okay, well, then I shouldn't be surprised. I shouldn't be bzzzt that there's bzzzt going on in the markets right now. It's sitting right here in the chart.
I'm looking at when transiting Uranus, Ingress is into Gemini, just as you pointed out. It's going to ultimately square Mars in Virgo in the stock exchange's natal horoscope. And Mars in Virgo is, I guess, I don't know, you've got it near the ascendant, right? So Uranus is going through the 10th house of the natal stock exchange chart, as far as I can tell here.
Yeah, if this was not set to the sun on the ascendant point,
Yeah, okay,
then
yeah.
that's exactly right. If we were to
So
set
I
this
don't
to the
know.
ascendant, yeah.
How would you interpret this with coming? Now, this is about 3.5, 4 years away. Uranus in Gemini, transiting Uranus, squaring the stock exchange's natal Mars in Virgo. That's a very disruptive, very disruptive.
And there's one thing that I think any investor needs to consider. That is, where are you on the timeline and how much of a drawdown do you feel comfortable with? Because when we had the big great recession, I guess that they attribute it, the 2007, 2008, 2009 drop, A lot of people who were in their late 50s lost half or more of their IRAs. And when you're at your late 50s, it took 5 or 6 years for those portfolios to get back up where they were.
Yeah.
So you have to consider what Warren Buffett was talking about for a 30-year-old is a completely different scenario than it is for a 50 or a 60-year-old. So you have to determine what's comfortable for you. And this is family meetings. What are you comfortable with? What's your spouse comfortable with? Where are your kids? Are they getting ready to go to college? Have you set up college funds for them? How is college going to be paid for? Or is it not going to be paid for? Kids, you're on your own. All of these things have to be taken into consideration. So I am more on the risk averse side of the scale, which you guys know my chart. I've got 3 planets, the Sun, Mars, and Neptune, all glued on the same degree of 6 in Scorpio in the 5th house. I don't mind rolling the dice. I'm the guy that's moved across the country twice. I mean, these are things that are comfortable for me. Why? It's part of who I am. Lady Gaga, I was born this way. Forgive me. Not everybody can understand it. But now, where I am on life's timeline, is a little more risk averse. Not in a fraidy hole, but at a point where pulling some back a little bit when things are looking as unstable as they are. So I considered things like Warren Buffett did a major lightening up last fall. The 5 planets changing signs. Ray Merriman talking about us being at the crest of a cycle. All of these things combined had me pull back a little bit. And then obviously when the current president took office, the news cycle got very active. The market started responding to tweets and what do you call it on his social platform and all that. But all of these things have been moving the market radically. And then the tariff thing made a lot of jitters. So I think you just have to play with what you're comfortable with. The bottom line is with bzz in control right now, there's no way to tell what direction things could go. So you just have to square up to what you're comfortable with.
But what I was looking at with this coming transit of Uranus to Mars, the stock exchange Mars in Virgo, really applies to people in their 20s and 30s because that's going to occur in 2032, about 7 years. Well, no, it's before that, 2031. That is an aspect of earthquakes, for example. It's an aspect of natural disasters and cataclysmic wars. But this is 6 years away. The world economy could change so drastically that it becomes virtually unrecognizable compared to what it is today and even what it's been historically. So if you're 20 and 30 and investing, this is something that's going to get interesting. If, for example, and God forbid, but if there should be a third world war, you see, then how does that affect the world economy, the global economy? So a World War III poses a real risk of some substantial damage. And I'm not predicting anything. I'm just saying you have to look at
Well,
these and wonder.
it's it's interesting you're saying this because I've been following this guy on Twitter of all things who is a pretty good astrologer and he's also into the markets. And he's predicting same thing, basically same time frame, starting in 2028. And the way he puts it is biblically apocalyptic, basically.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. So
Yeah,
it may not happen, but
right.
if it does, it's very likely to change, and especially if, for example, we're all speculating here, if we are headed for a disaster like that wakes up the entire planet and human race, and they say, "Wait a minute, we cannot go on this way. We're going to kill ourselves. We're going to extinguish ourselves. We have got to get in control of this kind of weaponry and this whole paradigm of existence. Mainly, if such a cataclysm were then to create a need for a world government, which everybody says they're terrified of, what would that look like, and how would that then affect things like the stock market and the economy and so on? So his time frame is right on the money.
I think if nothing else, for us to just open up these conversations and start to look at the fact that the chart indicates that there is a possibility, and a guy in Germany and a guy in Arkansas are looking at the same aspects, the same transits, and coming to the same conclusions, that it's at least wise to say, maybe I should start thinking about this. Maybe there's something to this. Let me ask my water question, because it almost kind of falls right into this. Basically, this question was, look at all of the water events that have happened with Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, especially here recently as we've been in these later degrees. And I'm thinking, of course, of the Hurricane Helene that hit North Carolina and did so much damage up there. But now we have Saturn getting ready to move into fire. And this comment was, are we going to be seeing fire-related activities the way we saw water-related activities?
Well, that's the old biblical prophecy: is the world will end by fire.
Kind of what we were talking about. Yeah,
Because
I think that's the thing, is just measure risk is the big thing right now, because there's a lot of it in this chart, for sure. All right. Well, I hope that answers you got more than you bargained for on that
that's
question.
a happy question, water question.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like Houdini's old water torture illusion.
That was great. All right. Well, if you'd like to talk to Robert, you know what to do. Go jump into the show notes, grab his website link there, and click on it. And we'll see you on the next Old Soul, New Soul Astrology podcast with Robert Glasscock. Thanks for watching and listening.